to the good stuff. How are you today, Joy?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you for asking. Off the top, as always, thank you so much for taking some time out of your schedule to have a conversation with me. I appreciate it.
Of course.
It's not very often that I have the opportunity to have a conversation with a superhero.
It isn't true. I'll take it.
listen, I've seen the videos and it's amazing the way that you trained and worked hard to be able to manipulate your body and do the things that you're able to do. So many questions, where to start?
Thank you.
What encouraged you to want to go into this in terms of the dance, the martial arts, the acrobatics, the expression with your body? What encouraged you, or who encouraged you, and how old were you?
I think I found tricking, which is the sport I do. It's a combination of gymnastics and martial arts, as well as b-boying. I found a video of something very similar online when I was 15. And my family was about to move to Los Angeles, and I knew there was lessons offered here.
Okay.
When I was 16, I started. And it was just kind of a journey from there. I had a lot of coaches at my first gym who would help me just train or find different movements. And there were so many people working in the industry at the gym I trained at. It all sort of helped me on this path. And since then, it's just been a collaboration, kind of a community, just helping me learn.
Okay. Now, do you have family members or close friends that started with you when you first began, or is this something that you were just a pioneer or are a pioneer within your family with it?
I'm definitely the first in my family to do something like this. Nobody in my family had a movement background. My dad did martial arts as a kid.
Nice.
So when I started, he was super encouraging. Both of my parents were super encouraging, but this was definitely me kind of going on a road trip by myself.
Okay. Now, in terms of your dad doing martial arts when he was a kid, he stopped as he got older then?
I believe so. Yeah, he always was super athletic as a kid, and so was I.
Okay.
So he played around with basketball and soccer. He really just did anything. He had a lot of energy.
Sure.
So I followed like a similar path. I was playing with sports and couldn't really find my thing. And then, yeah, acrobatics turned out to be the one.
Okay. Now, was she athletic also?
She was as a kid. Yeah, both of my parents were super athletic when they were younger. So I definitely found some inspiration there.
So you got it honest then. You got that greatness in your genes. That'll work.
For sure.
Okay, so and you just gave me some education. So when it comes to tricking encompasses a multitude of things. Would you say it again for me? I'm sorry, I heard bits and pieces. I'm taking it in.
Yeah. Tricking is it's actually a relatively new sport. But it came from like the competition karate rinks of just people were doing like their forms and their performances and decided they wanted to add more acrobatics in. And what happened over time is that it became so acrobatic and so competitive that people started breaking off and training just this sort of new merger sport and adding more gymnastics and adding more like breakdance floor work and capoeira. So eventually it became its own entity, and then there started to be tricking competitions and gyms and classes. So I was really lucky to be part of the studio that sort of helped bring tricking up in the community here in LA.
Okay. Now, is parkour also a part of tricking as well?
It's kind of our close relative. It's like our cousin. There's a lot of people who do both. I personally don't, but there's a lot of people who do both. Parkour, the difference is that there's a sort of a playground made of everything surrounding you. So it uses a lot of like the physical environments and making a pathway from point A to B. Versus with tricking, it's just usually done on flat and it doesn't incorporate any other environment.
Okay. I'm thinking more than likely I've seen tricking. Of course, I've seen parkour, and I've trained capoeira off and on for 20 plus years. So I'm really familiar with those movements. The way that you move, have you had some training in dance? Because you move like a dancer also. I feel like the way that you move is different. You're set apart. And again, so have you had training in dancing as well, or?
Yeah, since I started tricking, actually I trained just acrobatics for probably about 3 to 4 years.
Okay.
And when I was 18, I met the director of a dance company named Jacob Jonas, the company. And he works with a lot of different types of movers, but his company is a modern contemporary company.
Okay.
And he sort of took me under his wing and started teaching me a lot of contemporary dance.
Okay.
So since then, I'm now 24. So since then, it's just been a journey of merging the contemporary dance worlds and the acrobatic world that I come from.
Okay. And as far as the martial arts is concerned, have you ever trained a traditional or non-traditional martial art, or have the martial arts and movements and skill that you acquire come from tricking?
I definitely haven't trained. No, I mean, I would
Really?
love to at some point. No.
Wow. Okay.
I think just because I grew up, like everything in our community, since it's so young, is just growing up watching the people who invented these movements and how they do them. And so since they all have like a very heavy, like technical martial arts background, just learning from them and sort of watching and studying their technique really like lended to how I move. But because there's no combative element of tricking, it's interesting. The kicks almost become more for aesthetic than they do for like actual purpose or fighting sake.
Okay. Now, in terms of the martial arts, do you have something in particular that stands out that you like to train? Anything in particular?
I think a lot of what I do, a lot of the movements from tricking that I like are from wushu.
Okay.
So a lot of they play with a lot of things called like butterfly twists and things on a certain horizontal axis, and that's always been what I've kind of gravitated towards. I think it's like the most flowy. And even before I started dance, I kind of had the eye for like the more flowy side of martial arts, so I would gravitate towards learning those movements.
Okay.
So I would study a lot of like wushu technicians just doing their thing to the best of their ability.
Okay. Okay. So far as it relates to tricking and the acrobatics and the poetry in motion, that which is you, what would you say is your proudest moment thus far in doing what you've done?
Oh my goodness, wow. There's a few. It's honestly, it's interesting. I feel like the one that comes to mind, which was actually recent, was I was like really honored to do a collaboration with Cartoon Network.
Nice. Congratulations.
Thank you. They took a video of mine and created a little series of it just to inspire. They were highlighting different artists to inspire kids to try different movements and find their pathway. And there's been a lot of really cool opportunities along the year, but for some reason I posted that one, and the entire tricking community really like rallied behind me because everyone grew up watching cartoons and like different animes and stuff on Cartoon Network. So to be able to kind of put tricking on that platform was really big for me.
Okay. So did you grow up with the anime as well then?
I grew up with a lot of cartoons. It's interesting. My family never had like cable TV or anything, so I would go over when I was at my grandma's house. I'd like play different cartoons, watch Cartoon Network, Disney Channel. So I've seen a bit, but I know some people it's a bigger part of their childhood for sure.
For sure. When you said anime, I thought Dragon Ball Z, and and if you're familiar with Dragon Ball Z and power level raising, you and charging up and all that good stuff, just you always raising that power level in terms of just how you do what you do. It's amazing to watch, I tell you.
Thank you.
Encouraging us, so you're welcome. Tell me about, what is it, movement and joy, or find joy in movement. Tell me about that.
Yeah. It was interesting. Find joy in movement is something I kind of dropped off of it for a while, but when I was first starting, it was my website handle, because Joy Isabella Brown I think was taken, so I was like, and I was playing around with ideas. I was playing with ideas, and I was just always moving. So I think my dad actually might have brainstormed it with me one day. I was like, find joy in movement, that's what it should be. And it sort of just became my handle and my like personal brand for a second, I think, before I found a personal brand in just my name and just who I am as an artist.
Sure.
And it's still something, it's funny, it's coming back into my life. Someone reminded me of it the other day, and I was like, oh yeah, that's really cool. So I don't know, for me, I guess it could represent the community of people who helped me get here, but it's nothing more than sort of a catchy phrase I found to help describe myself at the beginning.
Sounds good. And you threw your name in. So I mean, yes, definitely. That's a good idea by your dad, by the way, for sure. We spoke about proudest moments as far as the tricking is concerned. What about in life as a whole? What have you done thus far that you're really proud of? outside of tricking?
Outside of tricking, that's
Hmm.
interesting. I think, uh, honestly, I think something that makes me really happy and just brings me a lot of pride is like the community I'm surrounded with,
Okay,
um, and the relationships I've developed. Like I think
sure.
as a kid, I was very very quiet and I couldn't really
Hmm.
connect with a lot of people.
Okay.
So I kind of always dreamed of having like a group of close friends who understood and were similar to me. And yeah, oddly enough, it like found me, I think, as I found my passion.
Okay.
Um, and just having, I think having that support in that community and being able to have relationships that have really like fed me and filled me up, especially when I'm not training, even just
Hmm.
people to talk to and support has been just kind of the highlight of my life. I think I'm really grateful for the people around me.
For sure, for sure. Now, with doing everything that you do, the amount of rest that's required, the amount of training, and you are in phenomenal shape. To see it, I can see that you're in great shape, and then you have to be strong and in good shape to do what you do. What kind of nutrition? How do you eat? What kind of food do you eat? What do you adhere to in terms of feeding and fueling your body?
Yeah, it fluctuates for sure.
Okay.
I think I have the benefit that I'm young enough that my metabolism sort of burns off anything that it needs, but it's a lot of just like I'd say like
Hmm.
fruit, vegetable, water, coffee, protein.
Okay.
When I'm training, especially, like the only thing my body will physically start to crave, like specifically fruit or like that type of fiber.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I try to always have protein after I train,
Hmm.
and I stick to that pretty loosely. I don't like anything that's like too heavy or fried or just like too, covered in sauce when I'm training.
Hmm.
I think as long as I stick to that on my training days, especially like if I'm in a creative process, because it'll be 7 to 8 hours, just making sure I get like really colorful food on my palate just throughout the
Okay.
whole day.
Hmm.
And it sort of frees up my body to sort of have the space to be able to eat whatever I'd like in the evenings.
Hmm.
Just because if you're burning things so quickly throughout the day, you kind of have a little space at the end to cheat if you decide you want to.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, a lot of chicken, a lot of fish. Sushi is my favorite food, and it seems to work really well with what I do for some reason because it's just the
Sure.
perfect diet. So
Sure.
yeah, it
Okay.
fluctuates, but that's kind of what I stay within.
Okay. Okay. And then, like you said, you had that youthfulness is an asset. And the other, in my experience, upon my own physical experiences and upon observing, it's like, you know, your body, you make the adjustments. You eat a particular way, you do particular things, and it becomes a part of you.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
how often do you train? How many times a week?
When I'm in a training period, I fluctuate between like rest periods after work and when it's training just for me. But in a training period, I try to do like a park session for a couple hours, maybe 3 to 4 times a week.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, I think in a micro scale, I try to train, quote unquote, every day,
Mm-hmm.
whether that's
Okay.
like training like hand balancing or training like smaller conditioning movements that still feed back into my sport.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's like this active rest that I consider
Yeah,
training,
for sure.
which is just like either me stretching and conditioning in the areas that I know I'm weak, and I try to do that like every day to some extent.
Mm-hmm.
And then like bigger acrobatic things on my own, I'll train probably 3 to 4 times a week.
Okay. Now, do you have with the tricking? Do you have a particular aspect of it that you enjoy more than others? Like, for an example, the acrobatics more, or I
Mm.
mean, what of it in particular in that sector of what you do you find the most joy or pleasure in?
Full circle. um, for me, it's the specifically like flips for some reason.
Okay, that
Love
you're good at.
I like thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're welcome.
it's what I think I've invested the most energy in is like
Okay.
anything that looks circular and has like a clear and clean pathway. So like I play as well, like I worked really hard to make the kicks that I do within tricking
Hmm.
look really clean and as
Hmm.
technical as possible. Twists I play with, but not so much. And then specifically things like gainers, which are like the direct overhead backflips off one leg, or like
Hmm.
rise, which is just sort of a circular twisting movement. Anything that I can be fully extended in and sort of find some air time because I like finding the float in different movements.
Okay. Okay. What's interesting, and I've lost count of how many times I've said this, is in terms of people look at individuals like yourself that can do the gravity defying superhuman movements that you can do, and they just say, oh man, that's Joy, look at Joy, they see what you do. But they don't always take into account the amount of effort, energy, time, and work that you've put into this. They just say, well, Joy, you can do this, Joy. Okay, yeah, she can, but Joy worked her butt off for a number of years to be able to perfect these movements. Joy may have been frustrated or disappointed that she wasn't able to do a certain thing, but Joy worked, and here she is. So my question for you is, what would you say to someone that wants to get into tricking that may not have the confidence or the drive that you had, or even a support system that you had to get to where you've gotten to thus far? What would you say to encourage them to go into tricking?
Yeah, it's I think I was actually with a friend of mine the other day, Darian Lohman. He's a really good friend and dancer and mover. And he said something really interesting was, you don't really have to be talented to make it. You just have to be consistent. He's like, and if you have the talent anyway, great. But if you're consistent, like anyone who's consistent makes it somewhere. Whatever you habitually do will end up somewhere. It's like, it's human nature. If you train a thing, it will come to fruition in one way or another. I think honestly, there's a detachment when starting of just like, if I do it, even if I can't succeed or even if I don't get it today, I know that as long as I keep doing it in the long run, it'll lead to somewhere. And I think people write me a lot and they're like, where do I start? I'm scared. And I think like just starting small and starting, letting your movement be ugly, letting it start to feel in your body as opposed to in your mind, and just seeing how that plays out over a long period of time is really rewarding and fulfilling. I also think it's important to know your goals when you're starting anything. Like you might want to be the person who's performing on stage doing these massive tricks, or you might just want to have a better understanding of your body. I think just know the goal ahead of time will help keep training more light and more enjoyable and more of just a physical exploration as opposed to something that can really get you down.
Sure. True. Very true. You think at some point that you'd like to utilize what you've acquired in terms of your physicality, in terms of your skill in film, television, theater?
Yeah, I would love to. I think for me, such a big part of my career has been these commercial opportunities, of just being able to work with different brands and different directors and sort of put tricking on the map in that way. I would love to do a film at some point. Absolutely. I think because my interest of movement and film are so closely connected as well. I've always had an interest in sort of bringing that to a bigger screen, but it's been really fulfilling to see tricking just online more throughout commercial work. And I think it would be really cool to see it in film more as time passes. And people have definitely pioneered that for me, but I'd love to continue it.
Now, you would, in terms of applying or putting yourself or being in film or television, would it be specifically for like the stunt woman aspect, or would you want to get in front of that camera and do some lines with it?
Oof, I don't know. Maybe a healthy mixture of both. Why not?
Okay.
Why not? I mean, I love stunts. I love doing the sneaky stunts, but also, I think being in front of a camera makes you a better performer. So I'd love to play with all of it.
Sure. What's really interesting and really cool, I could tell by our interactions via email that you were highly intelligent and well read. It's just I just got that. And then your personality, you just laid back, just as cool. I got all of that from your email. I mean, and it's really interesting. I mean, so what do you read? What do you enjoy reading? I don't think it's a reach to say that you enjoy reading, because again, educated, highly intelligent. I mean, talk to me. What do you enjoy reading?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Interestingly enough, I need a new book right now.
Okay.
I actually am working so much in French-speaking countries that I really like reading, even like novels or like language study books specifically
Okay.
for French right now.
Hmm.
Um, so I feel like it's always a topic that catches my attention. What, regardless of the language, I like just hearing about like the structuring of different words and how they get put together and how that culturally affects a community based on how they talk.
Hmm.
Um, so I love studying languages. As a kid, I would just sort of eat up like novels and fantasy stories, and I think just like for me, it's a really great way to get out of my head and sort of let me just like dream and create a world. And I think that
Hmm.
applies back to your personality.
Hmm.
Um, I haven't done this in a while, but I went through a phase where I was really into self-help books for probably
Okay.
about like 3 years. And
Really.
I would check out a different book on a different topic, whether it was like spiritual um, or just like a mental aspect of growth.
Hmm.
Um, when I was in high school, because I just decided I wanted to think differently and sort of have a broader perspective on life.
Hmm.
So yeah, books like I'd say like The Alchemist, like books by Rumi, which are more like
Hmm.
spiritual readings.
Hmm.
Um, I just love the way they're written, and I think they help sort of build me as a person. Anything that's very like visual, I'm a very visual person, so things
Sure.
with a
Sure.
lot of imagery.
Okay. In your experiences, do you find that the people that you've trained with or done tricking with, that their personalities are consistent with how they trick? Because it's like with you,
Mm.
in your tricking, I do get bits and pieces of your personality, but you have, again, in conversation with you, you laid back, real smooth with how you communicate, and your tricking is the same, but on the same token, you have those bursts where
Mhm.
it's
For
laid
sure.
back, it's so smooth, but then, boom, you'll do something that just jumps out. So again, with how you do your tricking, I can feel like I can see bits and pieces of your personality in it. Have you
Mm.
found that to be true with the people that you've trained with and other people that you've encountered in the world of tricking?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think a lot of my favorite movers, when I get to meet them,
Mm-hmm.
um, they're super laid back, and I think like
Okay.
I definitely think the way you move is like an extent of your personality.
Okay.
Like my friend Mike always says, like you don't really know someone until you move with them, and
Mm-hmm.
like I think
Mm-hmm.
that's definitely true. And I think the people I connect with most movement wise tend to be very like just laid back, fun to be around in general.
Okay.
And also very quiet. Like I feel like a lot of the super explosive movers I know are actually very low key in their day to
Mm-hmm.
day life, and then we find this way of expressing ourselves that doesn't require words, basically.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Interesting. What is a word of encouragement or advice that you would give someone that is in an uncomfortable point in time in their life?
Hmm. Um, I think see your life as a timeline
Okay.
and know that like you've had rougher moments in the past and uncomfortable moments in the past. And someone also told me at some point that when you're uncomfortable, it usually means you're heading in the right direction. Because if you fall into comfort too much, you're not going to grow. You're going to be really stagnant.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but every season of discomfort, you usually learn more about yourself. You usually find something new that leads you into the future, and it also causes you to be really active. When you're uncomfortable, it causes you to find a way to actionably change your state of discomfort.
Okay.
So something good always comes out of it, and just know it's a
Mm-hmm.
catalyst for propelling you into definitely more comfortable times.
Indeed, indeed. What keeps you motivated? What keeps you encouraged? What drives you?
What keeps me motivated? I think for me, the drive comes from just wanting to explore more of my capability.
Mm-hmm.
I think I have a a vision for myself of what I'd like to move like and how I'd like to feel when I create things and what I'd like to stitch together. And I think just always keeping that image for myself in mind just pushes me to sort of compete against myself. So it becomes a very internal drive and motivation. I think the people I'm surrounded with, specifically like the acrobats and the circus artists that I watch and train with, have always been like a biggest motivation as well. Just seeing people move in a way that I didn't think was possible makes me want to get up and try it as well. Um, and then just, yeah, connectivity with everyone around me. I think it just motivates me. I think the more I move and the more I reach out and connect and try new opportunities, the more people I get to meet and be with. And I think that's always been a big one for me.
Okay. With everything that you just said, would you say that that would be your aspirations as far as for the rest of your career in tricking? Because that kind of ties into something I was going to ask.
In a way, yeah.
Okay.
I think for me, I'm really blessed that like I love what I'm doing currently, in a personal sense and also work-wise. And I think the goal has always been to do what I've already discovered, just on a much bigger scale.
Right. So I was going to say, other than tricking as long as you can, what would your aspirations be? But it sounds like that's kind of connected to it. So
Yeah,
that'll
absolutely.
work. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then like, for me, because I play with my community so much with film as well, like, I think it's just always going to be, for me, the desire is playing with the line between being the person in front of the camera and being the person behind it, whether that's like capturing other movers or just helping bring tricking to the forefront, helping get dance more so to the forefront of media. I think for me, the goal is always just going to be to continue pushing with my sport, and take that into performance for a bit longer until obviously at some point my body will give out, and then helping others just be more seen within that realm as well.
Sure. But the cool thing too that I believe you have that's advantageous for you is the fact that you're younger, and how you practice is how you play. When you start early with something like that, it becomes a part of you.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing. And I'm hearing more and more that even as we get older, it's not so much, but to a degree that we can't do things as we get older. But what happens is people get older and they stop moving. They stop doing certain things. You got to listen to your body always. At 24, if you get hurt, if your body says, Joy, you better set your butt down somewhere and rest, you better listen to your body. Otherwise, that's going to increase the period of time of injury. I had the opportunity to speak to Ron Van Cleef, a famous martial artist, before either of us was born, one of the pioneers for Black martial artists, and Mr. Van Cleef is 79 years old. I said, Mr. Van Cleef, right. I said, well, like, you're where a lot of us want to be, where I want to be. What would you say? How can we get to where you are? And he said, don't stop. He's 79 years old. He goes to the gym with his wife 3 times a week. He still competes in Brazilian jiu-jitsu. He still competes. He still teaches seminars. You know what I mean? So I believe, just from my personal experiences, from having conversation with him and just observing Joy, I feel like we can really do this thing for a long time. Yeah. And again, in conjunction with listening to our bodies, I feel like we can do it for a long time. I mean, I've seen people that are 80 years old that's moving slow and can barely do anything, but I've seen people that are 80 years old that, it's like they don't slow down, so I mean, but it's encouraging nonetheless. I mean, again, to see you do what it is that you do and hear you speak about it, it's like, good stuff.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Let me see. What would you say, or who are 3 people that have been your top 3 people that are the most influential or have been the most influential as you developing in your tricking, and 3 people that have been most influential just in your life as a whole?
Let's see, 3 that would be directly for my tricking style and my training. I'd say the first one would be my first tricking coach, Daniel Perez.
Okay.
Daniel Perez was the sort of the founder of he called it the cinematic martial arts program at the gym I first started at. And he very much was the person who understood how I thought and understood how to teach me things in a way that I understood, and also encouraged me to find a way to think of things that worked for me if they didn't work for anyone else. And even when I took lessons from him for a bit, and when I started to move, I had to move out of LA, he was like, I think you have a good understanding of movement, and if you just keep training, he was like, message me. He's like, I think you're going to be okay. And he would very much just like, message me, and I would send him training videos and he'd help me out. And I think he's honestly like the reason I continued with it from the get. Let's see, who else? There's a tricking performer named Denise Sherfa, and I only met him once or twice, but honestly, there's the movie Tron, the new one, with Olivia Wilde, and there's a scene where Rinsler is this like bad character, and it's played by Anish Sherfa in mocap. So you see him tricking in the movie, and I remember seeing that and just being like, oh wow, like tricking on the big screen. And I think his sort of career arc of going from a kid practicing martial arts to being like a very major stunt performer, and also someone who was within the dance world performing as well, definitely inspired me. And the third one that's interesting. The third one, I think it varies based on the day to day. I couldn't pick one person. I have like a roster of circus artists who I watch, and I think, yeah, the entire circus community as a whole really just inspires me and how I move.
In terms of circus community, like contortionists, for an example, or acrobats, or?
I think contemporary circus is more like acro-y. It's a little bit more flippy, and it's all the rolls and sort of fun stuff that I've been playing with recently. Also, a lot of contemporary circus borders on contemporary dance. I think it's very movement based, and it's less about an apparatus and more just about partnering and moving solo. So yeah, there's a lot of it's a new sort of niche I found recently, but it's something that's been inspiring me the most.
Okay. So that's 3 people within tricking. Tell me about life. Who are 3 people that have motivated, inspired, and or encouraged you on your journey thus far?
Yeah, I think, of course, first and foremost, Jacob Jonas. He was my first mentor. He brought me into dance and movement. He's the only reason I dance, honestly. He gave me, I met him and he gave me sort of 2 weeks to learn how to dance and do choreography, and then threw me on a stage. So
oh, wow.
He had a lot of trust in me, and he definitely is like the reason that I started to begin with. And I'm still really lucky to have him in my life and be able to work with him here and there. I would say Mike Tyus. He's been my creative partner for a long time now, and just like a really good friend. And specifically during the pandemic, we would create a lot together and just go to the park and make dance films and whatnot, and things that would get seen and lead to work for both of us. And it's been really encouraging to grow in that way with him in terms of movement and independence. He also comes from circus, so he's a bit of a movement monster. I found a lot of new pathways and mindsets from him. I mean, honestly, I think the third, if I could sort of double it up, would just be my parents in general.
Sure.
I think they've been really supportive, and I think they sacrificed a lot to let me pursue tricking when I was young. Yeah, I think they would drive. We didn't really live inside the city, so they would drive so far just to get me to lessons, or like even when money was super tight, they would just spend it all basically to let me be in open gym or to be in lessons.
Wow.
They really supported me from the get, and they're still very supportive. So
sure. Do you feel like, knowing that they sacrificed for you that way, does that still drive you to a degree when you're training and when you're doing different things as it relates to tricking?
Yeah, absolutely. I think at some point, like especially as you get older, there's naturally a switch where you're doing things more for yourself than for your family. But I think just knowing that they've been supportive, and every time I tell them about what I'm doing, they're super proud. Yeah, it's definitely rewarding, and it's nice to know that they've just sort of been there in support since the get.
Okay. What's something that you wish that someone had shared with you that would have been good advice or encouraging words when you were facing a period of uncertainty in your life or discomfort? What's something you wish someone had shared with you that would have been helpful?
I think don't let your emotions get the best of you. I think like I used to struggle with depression, and I think sometimes I still do, but I think when I was going through really uncomfortable seasons, especially when I first started out my career, it would really make me crippled, and I would sort of buckle down and not be able to leave the house, or I'd be so focused on like what I couldn't do, or what was affecting me, that it would stop my growth. And I think just continuing to do the work throughout the seasons of discomfort actually will free your mind up a lot. It's very healing, and I think it actually you can't get stuck in like complacency when you're deep in your feelings, because discomfort can be really hard to go through. But I think just continuing to push through it, and just knowing that the work will pay off, even if your heart isn't feeling fully happy or fulfilled in that moment.
See, and then something that you said that caught my attention, and I feel like it's good for people to hear, and you and I touched on this earlier, about how people see what it is that you can do, what you've accomplished, and they are in awe of it, as they should be, as I am as well, and they're amazed. But there's a price to be paid. You may not always feel like doing it, and you just said that, you had suffered from depression at different points and still do. That's the side they don't see. That's the side that they don't see. And I enjoy the fact that people like yourself are honest and transparent about the struggles or adversities that you face, because what that does is, you being as talented as you are, that lets other people know that may not have that level of encouragement or discipline or drive that you have. That lets them know, hey, Joy does all these things, but Joy still struggles too. Joy is human. So if Joy still struggles and she is as great as she is, I struggle too. So I can push through and draw out some greatness as well, So thanks for sharing that. I appreciate it.
Of course.
So, but it has been an honor and a pleasure to have a conversation with you. I want to thank you again for taking some time out of your busy schedule to sit down and listen to me run off at my mouth. I appreciate it.
No, it's an honor. Thank you for having me. Honestly, it was just
welcome.
Great chat.
Absolutely, and I'm looking forward to seeing what else you do.
Me too. Me too, honestly.
Hey, keep shining, keep up the good work. Your world, we are all watching. So enjoy the rest of your day. Keep shining, and we will continue to see you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Kendrick. I really appreciated this.
You're very welcome, Joy. Take care. Enjoy your day, okay?
Take care. Thank you.
You're welcome.